Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session Exposing Vulnerabilities Ethical Hacking in Supply Chain Security. This is the fifth and last session in a series with Sergey Chubarov. I am Renal Vikaria and I'll be your host for the day. If you have missed the first four sessions of the series, you can find the link to watch them shared in the chat section. Before we get started, we would like to go over a few house rules. For our attendees, this session will be in listen-only mode and will last for an hour, out of which the last 15 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. Now, let's hear directly from our speaker, Sergey Chubarov, as he introduces himself and share insights on ethical hacking and supply chain security.
All right, so then let's get started. Welcome to the my latest, at least, close to Christmas session, exposing vulnerabilities, ethical hacking in supply chain security. I would say this session will not be very typical for my typical delivery because normally if I like speak about other topics, I'm trying to show you as many live demos as possible. But this topic is really hard to demonstrate like from the beginning to the end because a lot of things needs to be done on the like a policies level, on the like choosing the right supplier, and just the like you need to have like operational approach. I will show you, of course, some demos. Don't worry too much about this, but like the ratio of demos and slides this time will be different compared to you used to if you get used to if you attend any other session that I delivered. Just like I'm not my style is still demo based, but this topic is very specific, so it requires a bit more talking compared to like other topics. All right, so few words about myself. Nice slide about, I mean, maybe my picture is not nice, but less about certifications. And so me, Sergey, certified ethical hacker, master, PENT, CCSE, instructor, and so forth. Speaker at the conference. You may also find my T-shirt with Hacker Halted. That's where that was conference from EC Council. Heaven in Atlanta in person. I guess it will be the same conference will take place next year, but we'll see. All right, so that's not that's not the first session I'm delivering here, but again that will be the most specialized session about like vulnerabilities and supply chain. So let's take a look what is supply chain attack. And again, it's something I cannot really show you supply chain attack because as name suggests, it's like about compromising of vendors, suppliers, and so forth. So supply chain attack is the type of the cyber attack that targets a company's suppliers or vendors in order to gain authorized access to the company's system or data. So, for example, if you even if you're a small company, even if you are a small company, you still have suppliers. You don't do everything completely yourself, even for the small companies. But for the large companies, it's even worse. So like large companies, when they produce some equipment or software, they have so many different components that may be developed separately, created separately. And there are some companies that, something like quite common that you have on your maybe on your table or like iPhone or like some kind of smartphone. So it's so many components that created by different vendors. So and the company that created the webcam, the camera, not webcam, but camera, is not the same company that created the processor, of course. So the glasses and so forth, that was created by different suppliers. So different suppliers. And suppliers, they may have different level of security, different level of protection, and that can become an issue. Potentially, it might become an issue. So if I'm a company like, again, Apple, whatever, so you name any large company, so just because I mentioned iPhones, that's why I say Apple, and I have good level of protection, it doesn't mean that the same level of protection is the suppliers have. And we'll see that some cases that happen in the world in the past. But again, that may be the problem. So, and like maybe compromise the large company, it's still like a big deal. But if supplier that has the weaker security was compromised, then the piece of software or hardware maybe from this supplier can be also distributed to the like as a trusted piece, but maybe distributed to the company you want to compromise. And quite often, like attacks on the large companies happen through supply chain. So it doesn't look very straightforward, but it is what it is. So supply chain attack. So why it's so important to really manage it properly? Because again, supply chain, especially for large companies that have like really good protection, really good policies, for them it may be a shame that they were compromised and without really direct responsibility. So if my policies are good, but a company was compromised because of my company was compromised because my partner had weaker security, that's and it feels that I have no control here because like that was my partner, that was my partner fault, but I also have damage. So for supply chain attack can lead to significant financial losses for businesses, including costs associated with data recovery, legal fees, and regulatory fines. Again, supply chains most of the time also like there's a business involved into it, and quite often there's in case of supply chain, large business. So business with big income, big numbers. Of course, reputation damage, like any compromise. Sorry, damage. Here's the typo, and data loss. Data loss as like in any compromise. So supply chain security is regulated. I mean, not really regulated, but you may find some of the ideas of the how can you make it better using different frameworks. Whoa! No, that's not what I want. What's going on with this? So first framework that I can recommend you is called NIST SP 853. So there is like the chapter called Supply Chain Protection. I give you a link, so you may just, again, you may take a, like you heard from like ladies in the beginning, that you may take a screenshot and publish that on the web, but you can take screenshots for yourself and then they find it later on this link. So NIST. This one will give you many ideas about supply chain protection. I would say that should be your starting point. Yeah, it may look a little bit hard reading, but quite kind of really informative starting point. Let me quickly show you this. So I click on the link. It showed me supply chain protection, the part of NIST, NIST 853. They explain what might happen, like information systems need to be protected through the system development, life cycle, protection organization of main system accomplished through the threat awareness and many others. And if I scroll down, I will find here like the controls and where can I make an enhancement. In acquisition strategy, if my company is like acquire another one, in the supplier review, because it's not on, so supply chain security is not really only about the technical settings I can implement, but also about how I can choose my suppliers and how can I make sure that supplier is well protected. So here you can find out the like number of recommendations from NIST. So supplier reviews, limitation of harm, so it's organization employees to limit harm from potential adversaries and define targeting organization supply chain, assessments prior to selection. So again, the organization conduct an assessment of the information system components, information system prior to selection, acceptance, or update, and so forth. So if I read all that stuff, it will take the whole hour we have for this webinar. So it may become a starting point. Yeah, of course, it's not really the easiest reading, maybe not rocket science, but still quite generic. That's what like any NIST, if you write any chapter NIST, it will look similar. But again, it's very detailed, and so worth it. It's worth it. Then if you want to take it to the next level, and if you want to find like maybe more specific controls, you can implement like more technical controls. You can also check CIS. So CIS is also well known. It's all well known of their benchmarks. So you may find out also CIS controls. So the last one was 8.1 as far as I remember. And if you look at the CIS critical security control 16 of application software security, you can find out also about the supply chain there as well. So how to manage life cycle of your developed, hosted, or acquired software. Okay, so that's framework you may check to understand better about supply chain protection and also what kind of actions you can take to have a more protection. Generally speaking, the things that we're going to discuss in this webinar, mostly will come from, it's simplified, but things that we can find in those two frameworks. All right, so let's move on. And first kind of attacks we can have based on the supply chain is hardware-based. So this one is a bit more complicated to execute because, you know, now I need to have physical access. It doesn't mean that it's impossible, but since not all attackers like located in the same place, in the same country, in the same city as the target, it's not always possible. But of course, if that's the case, it is possible, and especially if there's some kind of nation-state attacks. And we maybe heard of those states, like heard of the attacks before. Nation states can send someone on the business trip to make changes in the hardware. So hardware-based attacks involve the introduction of malicious hardware into company supply chain. So it may be especially important if company has some kind of hardware again, and one extra module may break all the things or make them behave differently. It's quite hard to detect because quite often there are like thousands of other components and like assembled some kind of equipment. It's really hard to find a hardware module. And how do you recognize that this module is really malicious? It will not look differently. You will not find a sign that it's malicious. So it's much harder to recognize that, and especially again, assembled hardware that may be very large equipment and like a small piece that may be overlooked, and again, you never know which one. So hardware-based attacks, but on the other hand, again, they may be difficult to detect, but at the same time, they're more difficult to execute because, again, somehow I need to place that malicious module, physical module, which is like not always the easy task because attacker needs to have access, need to be located in the same place, and so forth. So we're moving to the next one, which is called software-based. Software-based, guess what? We can play that one attacker may place malicious code into the software component. So software-based attacks are carried out by introducing malicious software into company's supply chain through means that such as software update or a compromised developer account. These attacks can be more dangerous and more common than hardware-based attacks. Again, more dangerous because they are more common. Because it's not the same as I can do it remotely. I mean, attackers can do it remotely. And they don't have to be presented physically in the place. And there's a lower chance that they will be detected. And even if they will be detected, there's still, the worst, they will lose the connectivity. And if they don't live in the country where FBI can correct, or some intelligence may take them, so they are more or less safe. So hardware-based and software-based. There's one more that can also happen if the service provider can be compromised, which is company use service providers. Maybe they host their applications on the provider. Maybe they use in connection through this provider. So some service provider that in the middle, between application and the customer, also can get compromised, and provider may also become the part of the chain in this the weakest chain link in the supply chain. All right, so I hope it makes sense. This kind of attacks. Let's take a look at the next part. So one of the things that happens for the companies, they often rely on third-party suppliers, and sometimes even critical components rely on third-party suppliers. So companies, they have dependencies on third-party suppliers, and if supplier was compromised, then company also on the risk. And so one of the things that needs to be considered is to make a risk assessment of the vendor. So vendor assessment is a process of evaluating the risk associated with third-party vendors. And maybe that's one of the reasons also, not maybe, but that's also one of the reasons why it's like large companies, they're more picky about choosing like suppliers. It's not only because of some kind of their personal preferences, but because of they want to make sure that the vendors they work with, the suppliers they work with, they are also safe, and they will not become the source of compromise. So in supply chains, it is important to be able to find the vulnerabilities. So transparency. Transparency in supply chain is important to identify and address vulnerabilities that could pose risk to business. So in supply chain, there should be transparency. We need to know the whole supply chain, where the things come from, coming from, and so that will make things easier to identify vulnerabilities. And the oversight, supply chain oversight, is important to ensure that vulnerable areas are identified and risks are mitigated. So it allows business to stay aware of potential problems. So one of the main issues in supply chain is that the security policies of suppliers may not be good enough. And the problem is, if we have hundreds or even thousands of suppliers, and we never know, I mean, we're trying to know that, but we never can be sure that supplier doesn't have any subcontractors and other suppliers. So if I ask a company to develop some kind of application for me, this company that develop an application, maybe they have really good security practices, but they are trying maybe to save money, and they found some subcontractors, and they didn't check if the subcontractor has the good security practices and policies. And so in this kind of chain, eventually we may end up with a single developer that, I don't know, working from Starbucks, from the public Wi-Fi, and developing some kind of modules. That's one of the issues in the supply chain. So it might happen. So some suppliers may be vulnerable to security threats due to inadequate security practices in place. It is important for companies to work with suppliers that have strong security practices and to collaborate with them to ensure that security is the shared responsibility. So we'll talk a bit more about a mitigation later on in this webinar, closer to the end as usual. Let's take a look at some real use cases. The real cases happen in the past. SolarWinds. I think you heard of this attack. It was quite popular. Maybe 4 years ago, it was popular to talk about this. 4 or 3 years ago. So SolarWinds incident was a sophisticated supply chain attack that affected multiple organizations, including government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Attackers were able to compromise SolarWinds software update mechanism, allowing them to distribute malware to SolarWinds customers. So how it was distributed? Attackers were able to distribute malware to SolarWinds customers by compromising SolarWinds software update mechanism, allow them to gain access to sensitive data and compromise networks. So the supplier, SolarWinds, was compromised, and through SolarWinds, the customers were compromised. Maybe it wasn't the full chain, but again, the supplier was compromised because SolarWinds, it's our supplier or provider, provide our software for management, and we were able to, and attackers were able to compromise others. Let's take a look at one more Target. Maybe if you're not aware, Target, that's the American supermarket. Target data breach was caused by supply chain attack that targeted third-party vendor. So attackers were able to steal the login credentials of the vendor and gain access to Target system. I will show a few more details about that case slightly later. And one more quite popular case, and I would say that was the one of the first very well-known ransomware, not PETA. Maybe you remember year 2017 when the ransomware was a year of ransomware, and when we have first WannaCry, and then 2 months after this, not PETA, which is more localized on the Eastern Europe. So not PETA attack was supply chain attack that targeted Ukrainian software company, compromising the software update mechanism and allowing attackers to distribute this destructive malware. What is interesting about that one of the suppliers, that it was the company that ran by 2 people. And of course, they didn't have many concerns about security. I mean, before that, at least. All right, so now let's take a look. Let's take a look. What we can do with this? Like, okay, we know this problem exists. What we can do? And first of all, is to have supply chain security. Implement robust security policies that cover all aspects of supply chain, including suppliers, vendors, is crucial to mitigate suppliers and vendors, and it's crucial for mitigate security risk. So it's not only about to configure something. It's really important to choose the right supplier, to make sure that your suppliers have the right security policies. And quite often, what might help you here is if suppliers is compliant. So maybe you heard of that, like suppliers, like companies have concerns about to be compliant with NIST, to be compliant with different NIST, ISO, and so forth. So if they're compliant with ISO and they have a proof from the organization that from some kind of organization that made assessment, it is a proof that they implement security policies. And so potentially this company is more secure than the company that is not compliant. So that's why even if there is no enforcement from government, there are still companies, they want to stay in industry, and compliance may be one of the important aspects of the supply chain security. Okay, next one will be secure coding practices. So requiring suppliers and vendors to follow secure coding practices and important aspects of company security policy and prevent security breaches and data leak. That's where I'm going to really even show you a few demos. I'm not really going to code, but I will show you some of the things you can enable on your GitHub if you have a GitHub, then to make things slightly, potentially more secure. So then one more security assessment. That's where we're going to take a look at the more details about assessment details on the next slide. So suppliers and vendors should undergo security assessment on a regular basis to ensure that they are meeting the company security standards. And report incidents. So suppliers and vendors should be required to report the security incidents to the company to ensure that appropriate action is taken to mitigate the risk. Let's take a look at the assessment. And so let's take a look at the more details, a few non-technical things we can do. I mean that I will show you on the slide. Then I will show you something we can do on the GitHub level. So first of all, regular audit. Regular audit important not only to formally be compliant, but also find out if we have any vulnerabilities and so forth. And that's where you have a chance to do so, to run vulnerability assessment as the security professional. You can company may take internal testing, so using their their internal resources, or company may run external test from other companies, of course, and so take a look at that from a perspective of another company. So make a regular audits and assessments. That's important thing. Then enhancing supplier vetting and collaboration. So companies should vet their suppliers and vendors to ensure that they have adequate security practice in place. So check their background, reviews their security policy and procedures, assess their potential risks. So really nowadays, like, I mean, if you work on the market for a long time, I mean, I don't know, like with which experience you have and which background you have when you're joining this webinar. But if you're on the market for a long time, you see how it's become more and more strict after every year over year. When especially if you're like working with large companies and you're a partner with them, so the more checks you have, the more requirements you have. Honestly, like nowadays, if some partners I work with, they also make a criminal background check, even if I'm just have some kind of projects with them, not full-time employee. So it's like I'm okay with the criminal background, but I'm just saying that there are more things, like over time we have more and more checks. So the same about supplier, a bit about supplier chain, since like we need to make sure that our suppliers have a good practices. Collaboration. Companies should also collaborate with their suppliers and vendors to ensure the security is a shared responsibility. So regular communication, trainings, establishing clear guidelines for security practices. So to make sure not only my security is good, but I also educate my suppliers how to make it better and tell them like, look, we are in the same boat. So if I have a problem, you potentially will also have problems. So at least you can lose the big customer, and also there may be legal responsibility and so forth. So collaborate with customers. And finally, now let's do something technical. That's the last slide, by the way. That's where I can jump to demo and show you a few things before we jump into the questions, Q&A. Honestly, supply chain security, it's really more about the procedures, operations, documents, and so forth. So that's why I said in the beginning of the webinar that I will show you more slides than usual, and I will talk more about generic things than usual, because here I cannot really jump into the demo right away, because we need to talk about many other things. But since during the session we talk a lot about the vulnerabilities, some problems and dependencies, there are some software components, services that may help us to at least find out dependencies and vulnerabilities in those dependencies, using different DevSecOps environment. In my case, of course, the most well-known, one of the most popular, or maybe the most popular, is GitHub. So GitHub Advanced Security, it has some, I mean, not Advanced Security, but GitHub Security, even if you have like a simple account without Advanced Security subscription, you still have a number of modules that can help you with to analyze for the dependencies and scan your code. So first module is called Dependency Graph. So you can find out, like, you can identify dependencies of your project. Because if your project is using third-party modules, honestly, you never know if those modules are safe or not. But first, you need to know the dependencies, find out all dependencies, because, again, you're using some libraries, and those libraries have dependencies, and so you need to find out those dependencies. So there's a module also called Dependabot. You can use Dependabot to keep your packages up to date to the latest version, because of course there are no guarantees, but quite often there's a problem with the modules. There's a new version already released where the vulnerability was fixed, but you're still using the older version, and so because the dependency wasn't updated. So Dependabot can help you with update those dependencies to the latest version. And finally, I would say one of the thing that really can check your code is called code scanning. So code scanning, you can use it to find out some security issues, vulnerabilities in the code that you have. So from here, I would like to jump to demo. Finally, one moment, I'm gonna open it up. GitHub. So let me click on one of the repositories. And let me click on settings first. So if you go to the here, code security, I can find it out here. So here, some of those modules will be disabled by default, some of those are enabled, but I can find everything here. So dependency graph, I can enable that. So this one is by default enabled. The PandaBot, don't remember for sure if it's enabled or disabled by default, but you can definitely enable it here. So keep your dependencies are up to date. So you can also receive alerts for vulnerabilities that like if like have dependency and this dependency got vulnerability, you'll get alert about this. So you can enable the option to the PandaBot automatically attempt to update the dependency and so forth. So you may find here like so all the name suggests group security updates, group all about updates that resolve the PandaBot alert to one pull request, allow the PandaBot to open pull request automatically to keep your dependency up to date when newer versions are available. So maybe even if it's not vulnerable, still new version can be updated. So it's like a number of options that you can enable or disable. Some of them are enabled by default, some of them are not enabled by default, so you need to enable them manually. So decide yourself what you want. They are all described here. If it's not super clear what exactly it's doing, against every option we have learn more here. Just click on that and find more description. Now we're moving to the key, not the key, but one of the service that may also find the problems with your code, called scanning. So this one will detect vulnerabilities in your code. So automatically detect common vulnerabilities and coding errors. So you can enable that. There's also a number of things you can enable here, CodeKL and like other tools, Copilot, AutoFix, and so forth. I'm not sure if you have Copilot because in my GitHub. You can also enable secret scanning, which will find out hard-coded values. Also, you can enable push protection, which will not allow you to commit the code that has some secrets. So it's like the list of things we can enable here. So again, if you're a developer and you develop some code, please check this part of the code security and decide what you need to enable. Please don't ignore it, because again, especially maybe important dependencies if you're using like some different libraries and components. So when I enable all that stuff, I can look at my code. On purpose, I made some vulnerable. I make it a bit vulnerable. So let's click on code scanning. But there are no dependencies really about that, so there are no problems here. But if I look at the code scanning, here I have a problem. So here it says that first of all, the highest is the clear text login of sensitive information that was placed. So what I have there in the script I published on the GitHub, I placed the hard-coded credentials. Of course, they are fake, but there's a hard-code credentials, and now it tells me that's something bad. And you may check for other recommendations and go through them and make sure that you fix them. I mean, of course, read them, and if you need to fix them, fix. All right, so this is that's the on the GitHub. Also, what you can do, you may use third-party software. It may be open source. It may be paid software. Usually, paid software has some kind of more advanced features with AI and so forth, where you can also scan for vulnerabilities of your code and make sure that there are no flows and other issues with the code. Well, problems with the flows and the security issues in the code. All right, so that's just like a small portion of the things you can do in the like supply chain. But again, the primarily it's really about your supplier management. Be compliant with the security policies and like the different requirements, regulations. I mean, NIST and so forth, and require that from your suppliers as well. I mean, maybe not your suppliers directly, but the company you work for, or if your supplier, make sure that like your company is compliant with the requirements of your partner. All right, so now we are on the. It's time to ask your questions. I mean, ask your questions, and for me, answer your questions. So if you have any questions, please do so. We are ready. I'm ready either to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Sergey, for delivering such an insightful and informative session. We found the webinar very engaging and hope it was valuable for you as well.
As usual, of course.
So before we begin with the Q&A, I would like to inform all the attendees that the session is in sync with EC Council CEH program. EC Council Certified Ethical Hacker certification is mapped to a variety of roles in the cybersecurity industry, including ethical hacker, security analyst, security consultant, site administrator, and network management executive. As per LinkedIn 2022, it lists over 1,000 jobs seeking ethical hacking skills worldwide, and individuals holding the CEH certification can earn an average annual salary of USD 96,000 in the United States. If you are interested in learning more, please participate in the poll that's going to be conducted now. Let us know your preferred mode of training and we will reach out to you. So, Sergey, should we proceed with the question and answer?
Yes, I have them in. I mean, I'm ready for read them on my phone, so please
Yes.
go for it. Yeah. So, how can security of these suppliers be measured to know how secure they are? That's a good question. That's why we, not we, but that's why company also have this kind of compliance. So that's why I told you during the webinar that like a proof that you are compliant with like CRS or NIST, or that you have this kind of some kind of independent auditor proof that you are compliant. Because to become compliant with NIST or become compliant with, I don't know, the PCIDS is slightly different because for financial organization, but just an example, like to become compliant, you need to follow some kind of procedures. So you need to have this like some kind of encryption. You need to have this protection. You need to have this policy. So you need to do several things. And the easiest way to like really measure is to check if your supplier is compliant with number of requirements. And for example, like in my experience, the companies I work with, and when they become the suppliers of the large companies, they were really about concerns about like, oh, we must become compliant with NIST because we need to maintain the contact with this partner. So yeah, the easiest way to measure is to just formal compliance from, the company passed the audit and became compliant with number of standards. All right. Next question. Sorry, I'm sitting with my phone, but here I need the question closer. One of the most dangerous tools like rubber ducky, because this type of attack can hard to detect. How to prevent this type of attacks, and can we use a right blocker tool to prevent copying any confidential data in small or larger organization? Rubber ducky and other kind of USB attacks. It's just a subset, and usually that's the part of the any of the baselines. For example, I think you can still see my screen, I guess. Do you see my screen? Yeah, I think you still see my screen. For example, let me just let me go to my XDR system real quick. Sorry, I didn't plan to show this demo, so maybe that's a little bit delayed. I mean, it takes a bit longer, but since I'm trying to answer the question. So if I look at my vulnerabilities here, and endpoints, I guess, yeah, vulnerabilities, and look at the baseline assessment. Let me click on create profile. Let's type something here. Click next. Software. So let's say I would like to test, like say Windows 11, and the benchmark I would like to use will be CIS for Windows 11, and they have different levels of compliance. And again, your like partner may require one of those levels. And so what I'm going to create here, I may create a baseline, and my company may be evaluate. My configuration, in this case Windows, may be evaluated against those settings, and tell where you need to fix. And you know, device control. What you mentioned about the Robert Ducky, in general, it's called device control. Device control, trust me, will be one of those. I think you will find out device control even on the level 1, so it's not even below level 2. So, so yes, Robert Ducky is like a subset of device control, which is quite often which will be included in any kind of requirements like NIST, CIS, and others. Thanks for the question. Let's see the next one. All regulations require third-party risk management or TPRM. I think it's mainly related to supply chain. Do you recommend a software to do it? Okay, so software. There are a lot of software, even what I'm showing you now on the screen, it will look at my configurations and compare with the recommendations and show me the differences and where I can improve. But it's not really, it cannot tell that I'm a compliant. So I can't use it as the proof. Most of the time for my supplier, I mean, when I'm in a relationship with my partners, I cannot prove that I'm a compliant just because there's some kind of software told me this. So when you, yeah, of course, it depends on your relations with your partners, customers. If they're going to be satisfied if you send them a report from the tool, and again, many cloud services can do so, like AWS, GCP, Microsoft. They do have their own. For example, I can, like in my case, I already have Microsoft portal open. If I look at them, my cloud services, and I'm check compliance here. I should be non-compliant probably. So let's check if I'm compliant with NIST 853 or maybe ISO. Let's click on NIST, for example. Oh, but while it's loading, they even tell you this, so that this compliance should not be interpreted as guarantee of compliance. Oh, sorry, as guarantee of compliance. So it just shows you the way. It's up to you to elevate and validate the effectiveness of customer controls per your regulatory environment. So these services are subject to terms and conditions, whatever. And so here I can see how possibly, so not really about if I'm compliant, but if my configuration met the requirements from NIST or from ISO or from whatever. But if your customer is satisfied with the report, I can just build the report here. They download the report. If I fix them all, if I make them all green, and I send the report to customer, if that's enough for them to trust that I'm like my policies are good, go for it. But it may not work for your customer. They may require formal compliance requirements where you need to really take an audit. So no guarantees that some kind of report from the software will be enough. All right. So good question. So all good. All Recently, I came up an incident there where I did a software composition analysis to identify third-party vulnerable components. I created as there are many terminology. And did components analysis. Versions were vulnerable, so I suggest to upgrade the version to non-vulnerable component versions. So my question is, what are your opinion on mitigating the risk after finding out there exist third-party vulnerable components in the project? So what kind of opinion? Should we work with this customer or not? I mean, should we work with the supplier or not? So what you described here was really impressive. But what I'm not really sure what is the question. So what is my opinion? Okay, you fix vulnerability, and that's nice. What exactly want to do next? So your opinion on mitigating the risk after finding out there exist third-party vulnerable components in the project. So I think the mitigation of what we discussed before. So first of all, if your customer, I mean your partner, your supplier, should be well protected. They have good policies, and also scan for vulnerabilities. And like there are a number of things you can check from them, from NIST, for example, and from CIS. So implement them to make sure that even if the vulnerability exists, you can find it real quick. And then I hope you understand your question correct. What are recent security risks that are associated with third-party vendors in the supply chain? Oh, I thought we were talking about this the whole webinar. I mean, not really in details, but yeah. What kind of risks? So let's imagine that you are really tough company and you create some kind of software from different components, and then you have a supplier. Maybe didn't even know that the supplier is like maybe it's a subcontractor, and your supplier is the like a single developer that maybe a good developer, but the focus of this developer is like some kind of prettiness of application rather than security. And the developer develops some kind of module, and you use this module in your software. And now, but this developer was compromised because like maybe didn't care about security much. And so now the code embedded into the developer software with developer in the module also exist in your software in your overall application. That may be a big issue. That may be a big issue. So it's like, you know, supply chain attack. Let me say it in other words. I think you heard of that. Weakest chain link. So supply chain attack. That's where attackers, they're trying to find the weakest chain link in the supply chain and break this one and break this chain link. So if your attacker, not your supplier was attacked, and then some malicious code was embedded into the module from your suppliers, and this code was distributed to your application, then you have the same problem. So it's like your company was compromised through your suppliers. So supplier became the middle tier. Last question. For a large organization using third-party application and platform where code review responsibility is where supplier is with the supplier, how to ensure security against malicious? How to ensure security against malicious attacks? Let me just double read the question. Read it again. Okay. So where the code review is with the responsibility of supplier, how to ensure security against malicious attacks. First of all, yeah, if you don't have access to the source, then at least analyze the result. So that's why we have like number of checks of the dependencies, vulnerabilities of the code itself. But that may be a bit of issue if you don't, if code review is done only on the supplier side. And maybe, yeah, you have still limited responsibility on the supplier side, like what supplier can do. So what you can do with this code. So here's again, it's more like organizational side. Make sure that your supplier also aware of the practices. Maybe you remember the couple of slides we discussed that like communication. Have trainings together with supplier, tell them about practices, about your requirements, how their review needs to be done, what kind of software they need to implement, send the report from the software that there is no vulnerability. So you can set up those requirements. If you check needs, by the way, they have some of those recommendations. Oh, by the way, there's also, let me quickly show you this. I think, let me close that. The one I show you on the screen. The one I show you on the screen. Also had module for DevOps, DevSecOps, sorry. Data security, no, not here, sorry. DevSecOps. Yeah. No, not here, Ian. Let me remove the word defender and just DevSecOps. Yeah, here we go. So one of the part is ensure supply chain attack, and yeah, here there are several recommendations like properly manage software bill of materials. That's what you mentioned before about that SBOM. Inventory of and the track in-house and third-party components for known vulnerability when there's a fix available. Assess vulnerabilities and malware in the software components using static and dynamic application testing. So if you do not have access to like the code itself, at least try to use dynamic application testing. Ensure vulnerabilities and malware are mitigated using appropriate approach. This may include source code local or upstream fix, feature exclusions, or applying compensating controls if the direct mitigation is not available. So it depends on the code and depends on, so like it, and again, of course, we still have standard, we have classic security measures like web application firewalls and so forth, which can also like protect of the application from some kind of attacks when the application already working. But its supply chain attack is slightly different, but it may like be one of the compensation. So generally speaking, when you don't have access to the code directly, of course, you are still limited, so you need to have communication with your suppliers. All right, so I think we're out of questions. Out of questions. No more questions? Nope. So, and we have like one minute left. I have time to say bye to you. All right, so thank you very much for your participation here. I really appreciate your in this pre-Christmas session. And that you attend my at least last webinar on the week, week of the month and of the year as well, and of the week as well, week, month, and the year. So I would like to see you next year, where we're going to continue with new topics. Maybe some old topic. We will repeat something old, but probably most of the time we're going to deliver new stuff to you. So always welcome. As usual, Merry Christmas to you, since I will not see you before that. And we wish to see you in the new year. And of course, you wish your suppliers, or if you are a supplier, to stay safe and find out all dependencies and fix them before they cause any problems. So thank you very much, and see you next year.
Thank you to our wonderful speaker, Sergey, for answering those questions and for the great presentation and knowledge shared with our global audience. It was a pleasure to have you with us, and we are looking for more and more sessions with you, Sergey, in the future.
Sure. See you. Bye bye.
As you all know, this was our last session for 2024, and we will be resuming again on the 16th of January 2025. We would like to take a moment to appreciate your participation throughout the year. On behalf of the entire EC Council and Cybertalks team, we wish you all a joyous holiday season.